Hello everybody, and welcome to your first absolute value equations video done at home. So now, if you turn to this page in your note packet, we're going to follow the steps and a few examples on this video. The steps to solve an absolute value equation first start out by saying, isolate the absolute value on the left side of the equation. That word isolate means to get the absolute value alone. Then it says you need to write two equations. The first equation will be the expression in the absolute value and set that equal to the right-hand side. That means set everything that's already inside the absolute value equal to whatever it's saying it's equal to. The second equation will be still everything inside the absolute value stays the same, but now the right-hand side turns into the opposite. We're going to solve both of our equations and check our roots. So follow below and we're going to do the first example together. So the first thing we have to do is set the absolute value, make sure it's by itself on the left-hand side, and it is. So now what we're going to do is set the inside of the absolute value, which is just an x, and set that equal to the right-hand side. So now I have x equals 3. Our second equation is to set the absolute value, whatever's inside there, which is just the x, equal to the opposite of the right-hand side, which would be a -3. Now I have two solutions because my equations are already solved. My answers are 3 and -3. I can check those two answers into my original equation. So what is the absolute value of regular 3? Remember, the absolute value keeps everything positive, so it does check out. The second answer we got was a -3. And when we put -3 in for x around the absolute value, remember the absolute value makes everything positive, so it does check. So those two are my solutions. Let's try example number 2. Example number 2 says the absolute value of x minus 4 is equal to 3. Now, the absolute value is all by itself, so now I can go ahead and set up my two equations. My first equation is to set the inside stuff equal to what it's equal to. So x minus 4 is equal to 3. My second equation is to still take the absolute value, whatever's inside of it, notice it's still the same, x minus 4, but set it equal to -3, the opposite of the right-hand side. Now I need to solve for x. So for the first equation, I add 4, and I get x equals 7. My second equation, when I add 4, I get x equals 1. So those are my two numbers. Now go ahead and check those to make sure they come out correctly. Go ahead and pause the video and check those yourselves. I'm going to go ahead and move on to example number 3. Example number 3 says 5 minus m in absolute value is equal to 1. So again, when you set up your two equations, you're going to, oops, I lost my equations, there they are. So when I set up my two equations, I take the absolute value, whatever's inside of it, and set that equal to the right-hand side. Again, the second equation is to keep whatever's inside the absolute value, but make the right-hand side negative. Now go ahead and solve for m. When I subtract the 5, I get -m equals -4, and now I divide by -1, m is equal to +4. I subtract 5 from my other equation, -m equals -6, and now m is equal to +6. So my two solutions are 4 and 6. Why don't you go ahead and check those to make sure that they are correct? You can go ahead and pause the video now to check. If you go to the next page, we're going to start on example number 5. And example number 5 is the absolute value of x plus 4 and then minus 2 equals 6. Now if you notice here, the absolute value is not alone. There's still a minus 2 on the left-hand side. So the first thing we need to do is get rid of that 2. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides, and now have the absolute value of x plus 4 is equal to 8. Now that the absolute value is all by itself on the left-hand side, I need to set up my two equations. Again, you keep the inside stuff the way it is for your two equations. So your two equations should look like this. X plus 4 is equal to 8, and x plus 4 is equal to negative 8. Remember, the absolute value stays the same. It's just the two equal to signs should be the opposite. And now you go ahead and solve for x. So subtract the 4 and get x equals 4. And subtract the 4 for the other equation and get x equals negative 12. Those are your two equations. Make sure you check those to make sure both of them work. Moving on to example number 6. Again, example number 6 shows that the absolute value is not alone yet. So you want to first add the 3x to both sides. And now the absolute value of x minus 4 is equal to 3x plus 6. Now the absolute value is alone. So now we can go ahead and set up our two equations. Remember, the two equations start with the absolute value, the stuff inside of it. So it's x minus 4 is equal to, the right-hand side, 3x plus 6. Now the other equation still starts out with x minus 4. And notice there's no absolute value around either of these. But now we have to make it the opposite. So I have to turn both the 3x and the 6 into the opposite. So I make it negative 3x minus 6 for this equation. Now I can go ahead and solve for x. I need to get the x's together for the first equation, so I'm going to go ahead and subtract the x. Get negative 4 is equal to 2x plus 6. Subtract the 6. Negative 10 is equal to 2x. And now divide by 2. X equals negative 5 for my first equation. In my second equation, I'm going to add the 3x to both sides and get 4x minus 4 equals negative 6. Now adding the 4 and get 4x equals negative 2. Divide by 4, x equals a negative 1/2. There are my two solutions. Why don't you go ahead and check those? If you checked those, you will notice that one of them did not check. So you'll want to cross out the one that did not check and write the word reject. We're going to talk about this in class tomorrow. So make sure you check both of these so I can see which one you rejected. Example number 7. Again, first you need to begin by noticing that the absolute value is not by itself first. So the first thing you need to do is move that 3x. So you're going to get x minus 1 in absolute values is equal to 3x. Now that the absolute value is by itself, we can go ahead and make our two equations. Again, I cannot stress enough, when you're making your two equations, you drop the absolute value and just write the stuff that was inside of it equal to 3x, and the stuff that was inside of it equal to negative 3x, the opposite. Now solve for x. So we can go ahead and subtract the x to get negative 1 is equal to 2x. Divide by 2 to get the x alone, and it's equal to negative 1/2. On the other side, the next equation, I'm going to go ahead and add 3x to get 4x minus 1 equals 0. Add the 1 4x is equal to 1, and now divide by 4. X is equal to 1/4. Those are my two solutions. Do they both work? You need to check them and decide if you're going to reject one of those. And last but not least, example number 8. Example number 8 starts out with the absolute value of a minus 3 is equal to -6. The absolute value is all by itself, but this one is a tricky one. You can stop right here. Can your absolute value ever be negative? By definition, an absolute value is a distance. So this is saying the distance is -6. Can you have a distance equal to a negative? No, never. So this is why right away, if you ever have an equation where the absolute value is set equal to a negative number, just a negative number, then you can say there is no solution for this one. Now this is the end of our video, so this is the end of watching absolute value equations. If you need to, watch the video again to get some extra tips on how to solve these equations. Watch the video again if you were stuck on a certain example, or simply watch the video again and now pause it and try to check the ones that we did not show the check for, but I told you that there may not be two solutions. Have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow in class.